mean, you all know Joe. I've been covering the Blazers now going for 14 weeks. Joe has been covering the Blazers for like 1,400 years. Something like that, right, Joe?
Greg Oden's draft, 2007. I've been here ever since. Outlasted him. Everybody else on that team.
Pretty much. Today, we're going to talk about everything that has to do with the Blazers entering this draft, as well as some draft news that's been popping up in terms of trade talk, et cetera, et cetera. And today, actually, speaking of trades, is the first day of trading activity in the NBA. We will tackle that. And of course, free agency begins on the weekend, 2 days after the draft on Thursday night. We're not going to talk a ton about that, but we may get into some allusions to the draft, or allude to the draft, or to free agency, as we talk about what the Blazers might do this week. But first, let's start off with the fact that today is the first day when teams can start trading. There's all sorts of rumors out there right now. There's a big rumor out there that James Harden wants out of Houston and wants to go to Brooklyn, et cetera, et cetera. So my first question for you, Joe, before we dive into the draft is this. Do you see the Blazers making any type of significant moves in these next couple of days as far as trades go?
Tough, easy question, tough answer. I think I know Neil Olshey is certainly snooping around the trade market, and I think he would love to make a trade to improve this team. You know, you look at what happened last year with all the injuries, and then adding Carmelo Anthony and the bubble and everything that went on in there. This team has a lot of really good pieces, but could certainly use would benefit to add some veteran help. And so if I were him, I would be. And knowing how aggressive he is, I assume he is. He has long said that because this franchise often struggles luring top level free agents, that there's three main vehicles, and that's the trade deadline during the season, the draft, and trading around the draft and free agency to kind of add talent. And so yes, I think he's going to be chasing it heavily. Will they make a deal? I mean, I'm not Nostradamus, so I don't know. But, that we're not hearing anything, could be a sign of things to come, though, because traditionally, from Robin Lopez to Mason Plumlee to Thomas Robinson, when there's been trades made around the draft or even during free agency, it's come out of the blue. So, yeah.
Okay, so let me ask you this. Now, I've seen, just in covering the Blazers for a couple of months, how people are dumping on Neil Olshey. And I've heard people dump on him before, for many years. We all know that. And one of the arguments against him is that he can never pull off a deal. He's not out there trying to make deals. It's always been my impression that Neil Olshey wants badly to make big deals. He's out there making phone calls. He's not sitting on his hands doing nothing. He's trying, but it takes two to tango. We all know that. Will you shed some light on that? Isn't Neil Olshey pretty aggressive? Isn't he always looking to make some type of deal to help this team?
Yeah, he really is always. Yes, because again, it's one of the ways he can accentuate the roster and add talent. And he's made a lot of draft day deals. They've been kind of in the margins. Again, adding Robin Lopez, I guess that was free agency, but the trade for Mason Plumlee he acquired right before the draft, getting rid of Nicholas Batum that year. Boy, I'm spacing on others, but trading two picks here for the rights to Gary Trent Jr., for example, a lot of those trades in the margins. And I guess one of the bigger, more notable trades he's made was when the Blazers thought they were a championship contender before Wesley Matthews snapped his Achilles a few years ago, as they acquired Aaron Aflalo at the deadline, who they thought would really bolster their rotation and kind of push them over the top. Obviously, that didn't work. But to the fans' critique, I suppose, he hasn't lured a lot of, big name talent, certainly via trade. And, he has certainly tried, though, many times over the years. As you said, it takes two to tango. But also, when you look at the makeup of the roster, they're one of the higher paid, higher salary teams in the league. They're a luxury tax team. I'm now remembering one of the bigger trades. Hassan Whiteside last year they acquired. That was a big trade for this franchise, signaling a drastic shift, for the future. And going back to the year that LaMarcus Aldridge left, they made several trades and several small free agent moves to totally rework that trade. So that roster. So I would take exception to some of that. And I think league-wide basketball circles, Neil Olshey is viewed as a shrewd talent evaluator and a really good GM. Blazers fans are hard to please, though, Aaron. I don't know if you've noticed that in 14 weeks.
Well, they're frustrated. They want more, and so they're going to blame somebody, and that's usually going to be the GM, regardless of whether it's really his fault. So to that end, though, the whole trade discussion usually comes down to one major question. Do you or don't you trade CJ McCollum? Where do you stand on that?
I believe that CJ is talented enough and fills a great enough need that you don't need to trade him to be a contender. And we saw that 2 years ago when the Blazers reached the Western Conference Finals. And my guy CJ delivered a Game 7 victory against Denver to help that team advance. So I have kind of vacillated back and forth on this. I used years ago to be in the camp that you have to split up this duo because of their undersized kind of, tandem, their defensive limitations. Although I will say Damian Lillard has improved dramatically on defense.
Better,
yeah. So some of that's not fair, but it's incumbent on the front office to build around these two guys. And I can say with authority from multiple people in the organization that there is a 0%, there is no desire internally to trade CJ. Zero. Neil Olshey is and always has been in love with CJ. He drafted him. He considers him one of his, draft successes. He considers him a pillar of the franchise. They just, extended him $100 million plus, last summer, or two. I don't know where we are anymore, but before the 2019-20 season. So if that doesn't, instill enough faith from an organization that they believe in you and want to keep you as part of the franchise, I don't know what does. It's a common narrative and an easy narrative for draft nicks and free agent nicks and whatever bloggers, podcasters you want to pluck to say that they need to break them up. And CJ's an obvious guy because you're not trading Dame, and I get that. And look, if there's an all-star, if Giannis is on the move, if another guy's on the move, of course the Blazers would make their team better. But I don't think trading your second best scorer, arguably your second, third best player, is going to get that done. So that's where I side on things.
I hear you.
What about you?
Yeah, I mean, I hear everything you're saying, and I'm not going to say you're wrong. I don't. To me, making the West Finals didn't mean that they were truly contenders. They got swept. To me, you have to be like a player in the conference finals to actually like go to 6 games and push the other team. They got swept, and the other team didn't have their best player in Durant for most or all that series. So like they were a pseudo contender. My thing
Blazers
is,
didn't have Yusuf Nurkic for that series either.
True. I mean, that's true. That's legit. But here's my thing. I'm big on history, and not that history dictates the future always. But if you look at the history of the NBA, the last 40 years, only one team has won the championship in which their best 2 players were 2 guards. Mm-hmm. And one of them was, Dumars at about 6'4", Isaiah was 6'2". But that team played at one of the best defenses ever. So that's 40 years where only one team has been able to win the title with 2 smallish guards, and they were defensive-minded guards as well as scorers guards, whereas these 2 guys are shoot-first scoring guards who don't play great defense. So you're asking, the Blazers are trying to do something that's been done once in 40 years, and that was the bad boy Pistons. The other thing is, that team plus the first Steph Curry championship team with the Warriors are the only 2 teams to win a championship built around the best player being a 6'2"-ish, 6'3"-ish guard. So that's another historical thing you're trying to overcome. So I've been of the mind, just based on history and based on around the league, you look at the best teams, they're loaded with big 6'7", 6'8", 6'9", 6'10" guys. And so when you get in the last 5 minutes of a close game in the playoffs, I'm taking the height, the length, and the athleticism over the 2 smaller guys who are going to be limited in the shots that they can create all day, every day. Like, I just don't see how you're going to win a title that way with those 2 being your best 2 players. Now, if they can add a third guy, Paul George, people dump on him. They can add Kawhi, Durant, LeBron. Yeah, you could do it, but those guys aren't coming. So to me, I think it's going to be extremely difficult for them to ever win a title with these 2 as your best 2 players. But we'll see. And then the West, oh my God, the West is just getting more and more stacked. John Morant, Luka Doncic, Devin Booker is going to get Chris Paul. Like, it's just a scary, daunting task to imagine them ever really contending. But
let me ask you this. One name that you haven't brought up, a name that I would like to see them pursue. It's kind of a far-fetched dream, but Drew Holiday would be an incredible addition to this team. Defensively, guiding the team, another veteran, another maybe the most underrated player in the NBA, pound for pound. That's a guy that if you could go get, you go get. But again, if you're acquiring someone like him or some of the other players, you give up CJ, what are you losing with him and what are you getting and what's that balance? So
exactly, 100%.
I don't know. And the Blazers, for the playoff streak they're on, for the success they have had, let's not forget the players that left them, or the roster overhaul that occurred when LaMarcus Aldridge left, and how that changed the trajectory of this franchise.
Absolutely.
Neil Olshey nimbly pivoted on the fly and drew a lot of respect, both among his peers, but also among agents in the league, for how he handled all of that. This team,
the Las Vegas over-under that year was 21 or 22. Mm-hmm. And at one point they were 10 games under 500, and they made the playoffs. That's still one of the most amazing GM feats, I should say, that I've ever seen. That was incredible.
Not only did they make the playoffs, they were a 5th seed that won their first round series. Now, they had a lot of help with injuries to the Clippers, but
right. Still.
Yeah. And going back, I remember that summer sitting at Damian Lillard's basketball camp with him, talking to him about the transformation. He kind of asked my thoughts, and then he shared his, and he was like,
"You said you took the under, huh?"
Yeah, I was like, I'm taking the over, but I'm not taking the playoffs.
I'm
not taking the playoffs. And he's like, Joe, I'm telling you, we're going to be better than people expect. And that gets back to this franchise in general is right. The biggest factor is that human being, is Damian Lillard. And if you surround him with talent, what we saw in the bubble, what we've seen in past series, I mean, we don't need to go over all of it, but he delivers. Okay.
Wait.
So
now, is that close?
It was good enough. It was good enough. It's 2020. We're adjusting here to the internet. One thing that he didn't get a chance last year is, I have made my opinions about Hassan Whiteside felt significantly through a variety of mediums over the last year. When you replace a player that both chemistry-wise, talent-wise, defense-wise, team-wise fits like Jusuf Nurkic, and you replace Hassan Whiteside with Jusuf Nurkic, I think we saw in the bubble the potential that can have. So Dame, CJ, Jusuf Nurkic, a blossoming Gary Trent, Anthony Simons with another year under his belt, Melo, I don't know, maybe Zach Collins, is he going to be healthy to play? You start going down the roster, though, and you do have a lot of talent on this team.
True.
Now, I guess to pivot why we're here right now is, what do the Blazers do in the draft to accentuate that talent? Because going back to what I said earlier is, Neil Olshey views the draft as a player acquisition vehicle. Now, that could also be through a trade. And I saw something come out today, and I'm not trying to discredit someone, but there was a report about maybe number 18 is in play, and there's a lot of chatter about that draft pick. Well, 2 spots ahead of them is the Blazers at 16. So, we're going to talk about a lot of young talent the Blazers can add, and I think you need to stock a franchise with young talent. And Neil Olshey has a very strong proven track record of adding talent in the draft. But why not try to dangle that pick for a veteran that you're talking about without getting rid of CJ, adding someone who is a rotation piece or even a starter?
Right.
Another way to acquire that guy right now.
Agreed. Okay, so before we dive into the draft, I want to know from you, as someone who's covered the draft for many years, we said 140 or something like that.
125.
What's it like viewing the draft, like reviewing it right now? Like, it's because of the COVID-19 pandemic, because of the way everything has been going on. How much different does this feel to you?
Night and day, literal night and day feeling. And I imagine most general managers feel the same way. People keep talking about this is an unprecedented time, and so we don't need to go there, but it is. Right. And 2020 is unlike anything else, and that's the same with the NBA. I mean, how many times have we talked about the bubble? We don't even need to explain that, because the NBA bubble was insane, which is the time we're living in. It's insane, and the lives of front offices and teams have been insane lately. Let's not forget that it was just 2.5 weeks ago when the league agreed on its CBA and its parameters for next year and when it will start the season, and just finalize the details of free agency and trades and so forth that they would start today. And so I can only imagine that it's like the wild, wild west for front offices right now. And when you look at what typically happens in an off season, is general managers have been scouting players and talent for years. And that ramps up in the weeks during college basketball season. They go out to different, there's a story about Neil Olshey driving in, terrible weather to Lehigh to watch CJ in some snowstorm, play. And that was part of the deal that kind of sealed it for him, was just meeting him and talking to him. And these guys get out to college basketball practices to talk to assistant coaches to get to know the players and their character and such. Well, they haven't had that. They didn't get the tournament to scout. They haven't had an offseason of scouting. They bring players in for pre-draft workouts to Portland. And while that's valuable to see them compete, and sometimes guys just do one-on-one workouts, it's nice to get that. What's most valuable is the interviews. They take them out traditionally before Paul Allen passed away. He would attend dinners or lunches or meetings with these players.
Right.
Bert Coldy, who's an important faction of the team and from Vulcan, would go out to meals with these guys. They would interview them to get to know them, to look them in the eye and answer questions. Damian Lillard slayed his, face-to-face, which years later we've learned, he's
I would
incredible.
imagine, yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So that stuff is important, and they haven't had that. They haven't met with team psychologists, and they didn't have a Chicago pre-draft combine, and a variety of mechanisms like that have made this a chaotic and completely insane time. So I would say they're behind on that sort of stuff and not where they would normally want to be. But going back to one of the first things I said, they have been scouting these guys for years. So they're not in the dark by any means. They just haven't had those kind of get over the finish line items that might convince them that this is my guy or that's my guy.
Okay. All right. Well, with that, you did a bunch of research on mock drafts, even though I told you to go watch 1,000 hours of film and give me your own mock draft, but you refused. Said something.
Hey, you don't know what I did. You don't know how much. You don't know how much film I watched. I have maintained over the last 14 years. I didn't used to like the NBA, and I used to love college basketball. And now, unless Florida State is good, I have zero interest in watching college basketball. It's slow. It's boring. It's better than it was, but it is what it is. And so, by no means am I a draft expert, and I have never claimed to be. However, I do listen to scouts, and I do listen to GMs, and as you said, I've scoured the internet for the so-called experts and what they're predicting.
Right.
And there seems to be, a handful of guys that are overwhelmingly targeting or pegged for the Blazers. Before I will get in that, I will say that I accurately pegged the Damian Lillard and CJ McCollum drafts down to Damian Lillard, Myers Leonard, and CJ McCollum. And Pendergraph and Cunningham, that draft, I was pretty good on that. Jared Bayless caught me totally off guard, though. Didn't see that coming. So anyway, back on target. Some of the guys that are kind of in the Blazers' radar. Let's start, first of all, with Saddiq Bey, a 6'8" wing from Villanova. Not an explosive athlete, but versatile, solid. He can be a solid 3-and-D wing, projected to be that kind of player. My Lord, the Blazers have been chasing that guy for years, so he can fill that role. I don't know if he's ready to play from day one. You really never know until they get into training camp and you throw him into the fray. But solid shooter, solid defender, and he can play multiple positions. Not only is the league going to multiple position players, but the Blazers for years have done that. Versatility, combo guards used to be a knock. Now it's an attribute. So he's kind of one of those guys. Shifting forward to Aaron Nesmith, or did you want to say something about Saddiq?
No, he's in my list later, so I'll get to him later.
Okay. And then next up, Aaron Nesmith from Vanderbilt, another kind of a big wing, a 6'6" guy, ridiculous shooter, lights out shooter, shot 53% from deep last year. Smaller sample size, 1 year of college basketball. Didn't shoot as well the year before, but I mean, come on, 53%. I believe you said you were watching some highlights and he didn't miss. So
yeah, he was unbelievable.
That's not a coincidence.
He was like 80 for 80.
There you go. It's like me on a Tuesday night. Lots of room to grow on defense. And, that's not uncommon for college guys, but especially for shooters. But really good size, a really smart player. People value his intelligence and shooting. I don't know him personally, but if those things portend to a high character guy, high character is something that Neil Olshey values immensely, and he has for years. It's a switch he made. After being in Portland a year or so, he identified that as something that was a must as he built the roster in this city. Now, moving forward.
Hold on.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
So one of the knocks on him is he's not a great athlete. He's not finishing at the rim with these glorious dunks. He needs to be, polished as a defender, et cetera, some lateral quickness issues. But I'm like, once you get past the top 5 or 6, everyone's got warts, especially when you get into the teens. But if you can take some warts, and one of the warts is not his shooting, and he's elite at it, isn't that, like, to me, that's almost like I'm taking that guy, because at the very least, he's not just a good shooter. He's really good at moving through defenses, running around picks, catching, shooting, after he's gotten open, which would work awesome especially with someone like Dame. Don't you think that if you're going to err, you're going to err on the side of a guy who's going to make probably in the NBA around 40% of his threes?
The three-pointer has never been more important
Right.
or more integral right now to the league. And so if you can get a guy that can immediately come in and make an NBA three, he is on your radar, especially if he's a 6'6", guy who has room to grow on defense, but again, is smart with that size. Yes, if it's a toss-up between a guy who can't shoot and a guy who can, I don't think there's a question there. And, before the three became what it is in the league, and we could go on and on about that, Terry Stotts valued the three, and Neil Olshey valued the three, and they chased players who could shoot and who could shoot threes. So keep that in mind when you're sort of evaluating who they might chase. Okay. Now, another kind of moving ahead to Tyrese Maxey. He's a 6'3" guard from Kentucky. I've seen him on multiple kind of draft boards, and we'll get into why you're booing that later. Teaser alert. But another combo guard, and I get the hesitation because of the Blazers starting backcourt. But he's a rugged, a strong. He's built like a football player, like a safety, kind of the anti-Nesmith, just a stacked, stocky dude. Has good touch, really, really strong defender from what I understand. Now, this is kind of the flip side of what we were just talking about with Nesmith, though. Not a great long-range shooter. Right. So, pick your poison. Like you said, you get down here and there, warts and everybody you find. But he could be a nice rotation player, a nice rotation piece that could give, a little ball handling, bring a little scoring, and just bring some tenacious defense. And I'm pretty sure that every Blazers fan just stood up and cheered when I mentioned the word defense, because part of the knock on them is their defense, of course. And we've seen the effect that a guy like Gary Trent Jr., who is not a lockdown defender, but an above average defender and an improving defender, the impact he can make. So keep that in mind too. Moving ahead to the next guy, a Memphis forward, raw 6'9" prospect, big dude, Precious Achiuwa. 6'9", 225, 7'2" wingspan. 7'2" wingspan. Wild. Big dude, lots of room to go. Good rebounder. I think he's so raw that he's not even a good defender yet, but he has the makeup to be a good defender. Right. Again, though, shaky shooting, and that could be a problem in the Blazer system. I mean, even a guy like Nurkic, we've seen him finally expand his range to get out and shoot threes, and if not, he can shoot a mid-range jumper. And I don't think this guy is capable of doing that. We saw some limitations with Mason Plumlee in his shooting ability and what they did. Now, Mason Plumlee was ridiculously athletic and a good passer, a good rebounder, and I don't think this guy checks all those boxes. So if you're going for a guy like this, you're thinking down the road, a guy who's kind of brings a beastly presence with room to grow. Now, I should have said this earlier when talking about the draft. And the big debate, I think, going into every draft, but especially this one, is, do you trade the pick if possible to acquire help now, or do you stock your roster, which will need young players for years to come with an infusion of talent down the road? The Blazers, as much as any team in the league, I can't stress enough how much they believe in their player development department. And I've written about this time and time again. They are staunch defenders in what they do from their player development standpoint. And you could go on down the list of the homegrown talent they have on this roster, from Damian Lillard and CJ McCollum to Zach Collins to Anthony Simons to the aforementioned Gary Trent, who was a second-round draft pick. They traded two guys to move up to get, and what he's become in just 2 seasons. Will Barton, Jake Layman, Pat Connaughton, on and on and on. They really believe in their development. So keep that in mind when looking at projects. And speaking of projects, the last guy, and perhaps the guy that gets brought up most in connection with the Blazers via interest, via intrigue, via promise, is RJ Hampton, a 6'5" guard from New Zealand. Didn't go to college, went to play overseas instead. He's explosive, fast, he's athletic, he's got playmaking ability, but again, a shaky jumper. And I do wonder about bringing a guy like that into the system. And Blazers really believe in shooting, so they would really be taking a leap of faith on their player development department and on their ability to shore that jumper up. But a lot of potential with him, and someone who's explosive and fast and athletic. Every roster in the NBA wants something like that. So that's kind of the makeup of those 5 guys. There's one more guy, but I think you wanted to say something. So go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say about Hampton. Everything I read about him talked about that he was supposed to be a lottery pick, but had an off season and he had a hip injury. So it's one of those situations where if you're at 16 and you can get a guy with lotto talent, I mean, that's a legitimate reason to take a guy like that there.
And that's something the Blazers, and particularly Neil Olshey, have a track record of doing. Nasir Little, supposed to be a draft pick, fell down to 23 or 24, wherever he was in the last draft. Anthony Simons, high school prep to pro kid, who if he had gone to college and played his 1 year, he would have probably ended up being a lottery pick. And so 2 lottery guys right there. Gary Trent, the other thing, a track or a family, his dad played in the NBA. So roots with guys like that, another thing that Olshey values. So I agree with you, especially at 16, because I mean, if we could pour over the draft over the years at players who were drafted at 16, I think you're going to find a lot of swing and misses more than you're going to find a lot of hits. And so by no means is this an exact science. And there is a whole heap of guessing that is involved in this. But that's where years of scouting comes in. And that's where you trust your gut and the analytics and all the things that go into making the decision you make. And so a lot of times, especially down at the bottom of the middle to bottom of draft, you bank on the potential of what a player could be. And I think RJ Hampton does fit that. And speaking of potential and kind of late weird buzz and a guy out of nowhere, which we have seen, Alan Crabb, not a guy the Blazers were expected to target. Jake Layman, Will Barton, all these second round guys, Pat Connaughton. The Blazers also, we didn't even mention, they had the 16th pick and the 46th pick in the draft. So two draft chips here. Neil Olshey Neil Olshey has been very aggressive at targeting second round picks that he loves. I've just named a bunch. Gary Trent, the latest dream child right there. The guy that is getting a lot of buzz that you keep hearing about is Jay Shrub. He's the junior college player of the year, played 2 seasons at JC, had a growth spurt, I believe, after high school, in between college. Really athletic, strong, solid defender, pretty decent shooter. Didn't shoot well last year, but I think if you're in JC and you're a potential draft pick, you're getting swarmed by almost every other guy on the court. But as a freshman, shot 46% from three-point range, which is keep that in mind. So he does have that in his DNA. And you're hearing a lot of buzz. There was a draft rumor by someone, and I'm failing to remember who it was, who did a mock draft and said that they had heard from multiple sources that the Blazers were interested in him. Our friend John Hollinger, former NBA front office guy who now works for The Athletic, has also said he's heard buzz about the Blazers being connected to him. And he really is a Neil Olshey kind of guy. Like I said, athletic, strong, potential, and kind of a guy out of the dark. You look at kind of Anthony Simons, a guy who I don't think any Blazers fan had heard of that until he came into town for a pre-draft workout. And now everybody is enamored with what his potential could be. So maybe you look at a guy like that with your second round pick, or maybe you move up from 46 if you think he's gotten too much buzz now, but a guy to keep on your radar as we enter the draft also. Yeah,
that would be extremely intriguing. I remember when the Suns took Amari Stoudemire a long time ago. I'm going way back out of JC ranks. And some people say, he played JC ball. And I'm like, so? Doesn't matter where he played. What can he do? Look at the guy. And when I watched the video of Shrub, it's like, you're trying to project what he's doing with JC guys to the NBA. And I think it projects. He's extremely explosive and athletic. And it just seems obvious to me that if he were playing at a Power 5 school, he would be producing, and boom, he'd probably be a first-round talent. So it's a chance to steal a guy with a later pick than what he normally would have commanded had he been playing at a marquee school, which he probably didn't end up doing because of whatever. It might have been grades. Who knows what sent him to a JC. So, yeah, that could be a definite steal.
One thing that you demurred earlier about was when the first mention that I had of Tyrese Maxey. And I think now is a good time to kind of get into this a little bit, because we have a strong difference of opinion on this matter.
Well, it's nuanced. It's not that strong. Well, okay. But go ahead.
Hey, we'll get into the nuance in a bit, Dr. Nuance. Okay, so I think there's 2 schools of thought with the draft, and it's the most common question we get.
Let me set this up first. Let me set it up for you.
Okay,
I'm hell-bent against drafting a guard. I think they need to go with a big guy. You say...
I say, okay, there's 2 schools of thought. Right. Do you draft based on roster need, or do you draft the best available player that falls into your lap at whatever spot you're drafting in?
Right.
I wholeheartedly fall into B. I don't care what my roster looks like. I'm not going to add a guy because he feels a need if he's not any good, or if he's not as good as another guy out there. I'm going to go get the best available player. When the Blazers drafted Anthony Simons, I keep bringing him up, and I know he underwhelmed last year, but the Blazers remain sky high on his potential. I know you love his potential. I think a lot of Blazers fans see through the bumps and bruises and growing pains that you have as a young guy. My dude was 20 last year, so keep that in mind. They didn't need a 19-year-old guard to go with Dame and CJ. He was the best available player by their board at that point. So Neil Olshey has a track record, I think, that speaks that he is going to draft based on best available player. And I think he should draft on best available player. And especially now, because looking at this roster, where they're drafting at 16, the odds are very, they are microscopic that you are going to get a player that's going to come in and be the dude from day one. The last guy that I kind of remember being low, I think he was 23 off the top of my head. Nicolas Batum came in as a raw rookie from France and started from day one on a veteran roster that was a playoff team. That is rare. And I don't think there's any Nicolas Batums lurking here at 16 or down. It's going to come in and be that guy. So you're drafting right now for down the road, for 1, 2, 3 years down the road, and or to stock your roster with talent that you can plop in a trade to go get a guy that you need. And so all of that throws into a snowball of an argument for draft the best available player, add talent to your roster, even if he maybe doesn't bring you as much help and if you don't need him on day one. Because you don't know what your need's going to be 3 years down the road.
True. I don't think we disagree by much. All I'm saying is, like, to me, you mentioned the kid from Kentucky. What's his name again?
Tyrese Maxey.
A 6'3", basically a combo guard who doesn't shoot well. So he would be the 5th guard on the roster, right? You're loaded at guard. That's the one spot where you're good at. Now, if he's the best player by far, and who knows, they might package Simons and Collins and trade them for something else they need, and then boom, Maxey becomes your 4th guard behind Trent and the dynamic duo, right? Or Maxey's just so good that you're gonna bring him, and like you say, keep him for 2 or 3 years, and maybe he moves in to a different spot. But for me, Damian Lillard's clock is ticking. His elite biological clock is ticking. I mean, he's got maybe 4 or 5 years left, but every move they make has to be to try and win within that 4 or 5 year window. So
hold on, let me text him and tell him you just said that.
I already wrote it and posted it. I mean, just look at the history of the NBA. You hit 35 and things start getting a little, and he hasn't suffered a major injury yet. Knock on glass, wood, porcelain, whatever, that doesn't happen. So the window is small right now. So we've already said, though, trade that pick. We both would rather trade that pick for something that helps you. Maybe like I just said, you take someone like a Maxey or Hampton and you trade another guard. But for me, I think the nuance and where we agree but disagree on this one little thing is that if it's close, like let's say we're rating the players and I have a guard rated 83 from 1 to 100, or 60 to 100, and I have a forward that's 78. But I don't need a guard. I'm gonna take the guard because he's clearly way better. But if it's 83 to 81, 83 to 80, I might be like, you know what? I need the forward. I'm not going to take the so-called best player available by a little bit when I need this big guy, because that's what I need now. That's all I'm saying.
Let me ask you this. Let's flash back to the Zach Collins draft, because I think it's one of the drafts where Neil Olshey skewed need. Blazers lacked a big man. They obviously needed a big man. They could have drafted Donovan Mitchell. Now, do you want Donovan Mitchell on this team, Aaron?
Of course. But now where did they have Donovan Mitchell rated? Because Donovan Mitchell what pick was he?
Good question. I don't know off the top of my head. But they could have drafted Donovan Mitchell is the point. So,
right.
Again, sometimes when you start going, need over best available, you kind of sabotage yourself.
You
13th. He was the 13th pick. He was the 13th pick.
So it's not like he was a guarantee. See, that's the thing. Like, let me go back to another nuance. If we're in the top 5 or 6, 7, when you're talking about really elite level talent, I don't care. I don't care if I have Dame, Harden, and Westbrook. If Derrick Rose is there, I'm taking him. I'm trading somebody. If it's Derrick Rose or Michael Beasley, right? You're taking Rose over Beasley, and you're going the 4-guard offense. So I agree with you in the high end of the draft. Later, because it's such a crapshoot, and now you mentioned CJ. Neil Olshey went and drove through the snow to watch CJ, fell in love with CJ. They didn't really need that. He passed up on Giannis.
They needed everything then.
He passed up on Giannis, who went 5 picks later. Why? Because Giannis didn't check all the boxes for He lacked physical stature other than being tall. He was just a raw athlete, whereas CJ was, quote unquote, the best player, but Giannis was the best prospect. I'm not blaming him for missing that. 14 teams missed on that, but it can burn you both ways. But I think we agree on like 90% of this, and we disagree on just a little bit of nuance.
They also could have drafted Rudy Gobert that year too. That was, for me at the time, was the big, in hindsight, they took CJ and not Rudy Gobert. But I think CJ has really developed into a nice player.
Yeah, and, it's not like taking Odin over Durant with that disaster. Yeah,
right. Exactly. Exactly. Yeah, and and the larger point here too is that, again, there are multiple ways to build a roster or to improve your roster. Correct. This is but one of those ways. And when I'm looking at need and what my roster needs, if I'm a GM, the best way to add those things is through free agency now. You go get a guy you need that's going to help you now, or through a trade with a team that you can add a guy that's going to help you now. Because when you're drafting at 16 or 23 or wherever they're at down there, they're at 16, but that guy is probably not going to help you now. And so drafting on need versus best available, again, you go get what you need.
You can more than likely find a veteran guy on the cheap who's going to be better right now than a young kid at 16, 17, 18, just on the experience factor.
Yes. Right? And you get the best available player. That guy can help you down the road to get whatever guy you need at that point.
Right. Okay. So all that aside, I'm going to say flat out that as we get to my little list here, that the best player available at 16, although some people have him going as high as 12 and some people have him going as low as 22. So I don't know what to make of that. But after reading everything I read and watching some video on guys, I love me some Jalen Smith, the power forward center out of Maryland. He is, to me, everything that they want Zach Collins to be. He's tall, he's athletic, he rim protects. He can shoot a little better than Zach could coming out of college, although Zach didn't play a ton coming out of college. He was at Gonzaga, backing up. I can't remember the kid's name, but he was backing up a pretty good guy. But this guy shot 37% from three. He's athletic. I think he blocked two and a half shots per game. He's almost like a carbon copy of Zach in many different ways, but he's 225. So he's pretty frail. He needs to bulk up. There's a little bit of a project there where Zach is listed at 250, 6'11", 250. This guy's 6'10", 225. But I love the fact that they need another big, because you and I agree that they're going to move on from Whiteside, right? So they're going to need some big talent. He could come in and either push and or back up Zach Collins. Now, granted, they're probably going to go get another veteran big. You're not going to put your number 3 big on a 6'10", 225-pound rookie coming out of Maryland at 16. But he's a talented guy. He's my favorite player at that spot right now, if he were available over anyone else. Projected to maybe be in that range. Do you have any opinions on him, or are you going to let me slide with that one?
And that's all you.
You're like, I already know.
That's all you.
Okay. No. Second on my list is Precious, just because I want to call him Precious all the time. I think that's a cool name, unique name for NBA player. And again, it's a need at forward, and it's the athleticism I love about this guy. He would be, and correct me if you think I'm wrong, he would be the best athlete on the team.
I think Dame's the best athlete on the team, but I see where you're going.
He's not a better this guy. Well, I don't know. As big and thick as he is, and the way he runs and moves, the way he can grab the rebound take the rebound, and then take it down court, leading the break, and then finish in a variety of different ways. His explosiveness. He moves with power. He finishes with power. Dame's a good athlete, but Dame's not on the level like Rose Westbrook as far as guard athletes go. This guy is an athletic freak in many different areas. The problem is he doesn't shoot very well, although he has a decent stroke. Like his three-pointer looks good. He's just only around 30%, and he doesn't shoot free throws well, 60%, which scares me a little bit. But I can just imagine this guy coming in off the bench, giving you some high-energy minutes behind Zach Collins at the 4, running the break, getting a lot of pick and roll slam dunks, et cetera, et cetera. So he's my number 2 guy, and I believe he was in your list as well.
Yeah. And I will give you, and I will say like a Montrezl Harrell kind of a guy, and the Blazers need a guy like that, a guy who's going to mix it up and get his nose on the ball and kind of muck it up and just play beastly.
Yeah, just be a beast.
They still need that kind of a guy. The one thing I will take exception is the Dame is not an athlete like Derrick Rose, because in the draft, going back to 2012 when Dame was in the draft, his measurables, his comps, his athletic testing was literally almost identical to Derrick Rose. So sit on that for a bit and let's keep going.
I'll sit on that. I've never ever seen Lillard do anything compared to what I've seen Rose do. But anyway, that doesn't matter. Here nor there. What'd you say? Homer? You call me Homer? Homer? Who has MVP? Who has an MVP? Anyway, I digress. Okay. All right. The next guy is Sadiq Bey, which you also had on your list. Shot 45% from three-point range, so you're getting a guy who can shoot it right away. 6'8" wing guy, which is a need. They do need a small forward. We're assuming Hood's going to be back. He's got a player option. He's coming off an Achilles. We don't know what's going to go on for Ariza, so you might need a backup three there. And of course, we don't know what's going on with Carmelo. He could come back maybe as a backup there. Who knows? He's a solid defender. He's not considered to be a guy who can create his own shot very well. He needs to work on that, and his defense, could be a little bit better. He might struggle with some elite scorers in the league, but again, he's a guy with defensive potential. Let me take this back. He has 3-and-D potential, but his defensive abilities at the NBA level are questioned in terms of whether he can be elite in that, but he's going to be solid there. So he gives you a 3 and pseudo D guy, and he gives you a guy that could come in right now and be a backup at the 3. You've already spoken about him because he was number 1 on he was high. He was in your list as well. Anything you want to counter that I just said about him?
No, it just made me think of something with all these guys, and I can wait to say it afterward, but I'll just say it now, is that, when you start looking at how they fit alongside Dame or CJ or Nurk or any of that,
right?
These dudes aren't going to play this year, and these barring some.
But 16, don't you? If they don't trade it, don't you hope they get a guy who can give you 10 minutes, 12 minutes?
Well, the last guy to do that, where the Blazers have been drafting, was Zach Collins, and he came on later in the year, and so you've got to go back to Dame. And even CJ didn't play his first year very often. So, you need a high lottery pick that's going to be that. Yeah. He played. Yeah. Right. And so it's unless someone falls in your lap and you strike gold and you get super lucky, and this guy who should have been drafted 3rd or 5th or 6th falls to 16, it's highly unlikely that these guys are going to play this year. You're looking at an Anthony Simons or a Gary Trent or a Nasir Little or someone like that who is going to get into the Blazers player development program, get better with age. And so, that goes back to your Achiuwa. I'm messing up on his last name. Precious. We'll call him Precious because that's what you like. He's a guy you can kind of mold who's got the who's got that potential. And so, it's one thing to keep in mind.
So what
with any of these.
So what you're saying is all my talk about rotations is just fool's gold. I'm just
pipe dream, exactly.
Pipe dream.
And also
disagree.
Also, again, like I said, there are exceptions. Nicholas Batum, I believe he was picked 23rd.
Yeah, he started.
He started as a rookie. That was rare.
Yeah.
That was a pretty good draft, Aaron. If you go back to the talent in that draft, this draft is not considered deep. It's not considered to feature any guaranteed multi-year all-star MVP type players. This is widely regarded as an okay draft. And so now I hear that year at, some years are great drafts, some are, you hear that all the time, and sometimes it gets overblown. You always can find talent. There's no question. So it's about identifying the talent at 16 that will help you, not necessarily now, but down the road.
Right. And I hear you, and I don't completely disagree. And that's why with some of these guys, I'm looking at specific traits that could give them a reason to put them on the court, like with Precious, the athleticism. Mm-hmm. Depending on how the depth chart breaks out. You throw him out there, he might be lost a little bit, but my God, he is going to be big, strong, physical, powerful, and might give you 8 to 10 strong, just, oh my God, dunks and minutes where you go, he wasn't so bad, that kind of stuff. And then,
now, what's your next guy, RJ Hampton? What's he going to do? How does he fit that?
Okay, so I was trying to look for 5 forwards because I wanted to go against this whole guard thing. But after a while, it just became difficult to justify anyone I would consider taking over Hampton, which we talked about a little bit. This is a guy who at one point was projected to have lottery talent. When you watch him, he's very exciting to watch. Go end to end. He's fast. He's quick. He weaves in and out of traffic and finishes well. Doesn't have a great, pure, deep shot, but he can create his shot. So again, it's a talented guy that, like you said, you're not going to necessarily get a guy at this pick who you're going to rely on right away. And if you draft a guard and you don't trade anyone, to me, if they draft a guard and that guy plays more than Simons, then basically that's an indictment on Simons, one. And two, if you know that you dropped a guard who's going to be better than Simons and you don't move Simons, then that would just be bizarre to me. So if you're going to take someone and stash them because you do believe Simons and Trent are your third and fourth guards, I guess this is the guy you would take. I just think that would be a waste. But if it's best player available at this point, I like what the potential shows with him because of the fact that he at one point was being considered a lottery talent.
All right. And then your last guy?
My last guy is the guy who shares my first name, Aaron Nesmith. Again, like I said before, looking for traits in guys where you think they could fill a role, no matter how small, now. And with this guy, considered arguably the best shooter in the country, shot 52% from three-point range, taking 8.3 per game. So he was shooting it. It's funny sometimes when you read a scouting report, he's a great shooter. Then you check, he takes 1.2 three-pointers a game, shooting 38%. It's like, if he was that great, why isn't he taking more? But this guy was firing up, great at moving without the ball, getting open, catch and shoot guy. To me, that's someone, I think you agreed with this earlier too, where at the very least, even if he has other holes, he's not going to be a major rotation player. You got a guy, if you stick him out there for 6, 8, 9 minutes, if he gets a couple three-pointers, he's going to make one or two, and that could be valuable in terms of stretching the defense. So he's my fifth guy. I actually wrestled between him and Hampton in terms of 4 or 5, but it doesn't really matter at this point. But that's my 5 guys. I would like to see the Blazers get one of those 5.
Well, you should have gone him over Hampton just out of principle, since you say they don't need to draft a guard. But that's another argument for another day. So,
I'm cheating to your side of this because talent-wise, Hampton might be the better all-around talent.
And I will say, looking at Nesmith is, and I don't know if Blazers fans are going to roll their eyes or like this or not, but think Alan Crabb. Think a guy who came in, who was a good shooter, projected to be a good shooter. I don't think anyone would say that Alan Crabb's defense was exceptional, but he was a solid team defender when he was trying.
Right.
I don't know. My man got an $80 million contract, so he was doing something right. And he was a good player on that, going back to that rebuilt roster that beat the Clippers and went to the second round.
Right.
He was a major player on that team. So to your point, a guy with a skill, be it Achiwu, who is just a beast, who can rebound and who can affect play with his physicality and his strength, or a guy like Nesmith who can shoot as well as anybody in the draft, and that might be overstating it, but who is an exceptional shooter.
Right.
If you're at 16 and you're looking for something, you look for a guy who's got a skill that can translate to the league.
100%. All right, man. For two people who don't cover the draft that often, I think we did pretty well.
Hey, man, this is my 15th rodeo.
Good job, Joe.
You too, brother.
Okay. In closing, but the draft is Wednesday, starting at 4 o'clock on ESPN. And then we're not going to dive deep into free agency because we're going to talk about free agency after the draft. Because who knows, between now and the draft, the Blazers roster could be a little different, hopefully, as far as I'm concerned. I think they need to make a move. We'll see what happens. But as of right now, let me ask you this real quick, though, make sure that we're on the same page with this. I calculate that if they were to allow Ariza to walk, they would have about $9 million in cap space before, because Ariza's contract's not fully guaranteed, before the rookie holds. And then they have the mid-level, correct? So they have a little bit of money to play with. Do you one concur with that? I don't know if you looked at the roster or not, but that's my number I came up with. One, do you think they're going to have enough money to make some type of decent, they're not going to make a great big splash move, but to make a decent enough move that fans will at least go, they
have the maneuverability. They also have at least one trade exception, I believe. And I didn't come prepped for talk about this, so I'd have to look that up. But they've got some wiggle room with that. And so, yeah, they have the means. Now, the question is that player better than Ariza? And if you do let Ariza walk, then you're banking on Rodney Hood being 100% healthy, no questions, no doubt about it, after his Achilles injury. So there's a lot of what ifs there. And then to that next level, you're banking on you identifying a guy that you are almost certain you can go and sign, who is interested in you, and you want them for the $9 million or whatever it is that they have, plus that maybe the mid-level or something like that. So those are the things that you have to weigh in. But I actually was pleasantly surprised by both the way he played and how he fit when Trevor Ariza arrived. I did not expect him to do what he did. especially at his age. And I guess that is something you need to factor in is how old my man is.
Right.
And you talk about veterans. Carmelo, he's old, and I can say this because I'm older than both of them. But Carmelo's old, Trevor's old, so you got to factor that into things too.
Yeah.
But I would be surprised if they let Ariza go, because if they do, they've got to have a sharp plan that they guarantee will work in mind.
Yeah, I agree. And I would say too, as much as I think a lot of people want to see them make an upgrade, if you do not make an upgrade there and you go into the season with Hood and Ariza and they both can stay healthy, that's not a bad duo alongside Dame and CJ. I mean, and Hood, for the time he played last year, looked like he would take another step in his career, and he's still pretty young.
Well, he was exceptional. And the big thing with Rodney is that he needs to feel comfortable and he needs to feel at peace with his situation.
Right.
We learned that in spades, both in how he played in the playoffs and last year. And he took less money for less years to stay here. He could have gotten more money on the market, which was what made his injury so sad and unfortunate. But yes, he is a great fit. Trevor Ariza was a good fit. Gary Trent, I think we both expect to take a pretty big leap this year based upon what he did in the Orlando bubble. And so you add all that into the biggest factor of all, which is having Jusuf Nurkic for a full season. He is the linchpin to everything. And I know that Dame's their best player and CJ is a prolific and clutch scorer, but I think Jusuf Nurkic is their second best player, and arguably, Dame's probably their most important player, but he makes everything click because defensively he's the anchor that Whiteside just cannot be because of a variety of reasons that we don't need to get in right now.
So those block shots don't mean everything? Is that what you're saying?
Turns out rebounds and block shots can be misleading. Double doubles too. Ask JJ Hickson about double doubles. And you've got and he's still not scratching the surface, but I think we haven't seen Jusuf Nurkic play, his best basketball. And what he did when he came back in Orlando was nothing short of remarkable after that.
Dude had missed 16 months.
It's crazy.
And he was amazing.
Crazy. And so, from a fit, from a talent, from a chemistry standpoint, you're looking at a roster that I think a lot of people are sleeping on with a healthy Nurkic, with a improved and confident Gary Trent, with hopefully Anthony Simons poised to take the leap we thought he might make last year. There's your fingers crossed.
I love that guy.
You got Trevor Ariza, Rodney Hood, who kind of fill that role in combination. I don't know about Melo. I think what he said speaks volumes about his desire to return. However, what is how much does his desire and fit weigh role? Because I don't think you want him starting. And if he wants to be a starter, you've got to let him go. If he's willing to accept a reduced role at his stage of his career, then there you go.
You might not have other options based on last year anyway. I mean, do you think someone else is going to say, "Oh, look what he did in Portland. Let's go scoop him up"? Maybe.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, he was another stunner for me. I didn't see that coming. I that was a Hail Mary signing by the Blazers. That scored. It was like DeAndre Hopkins last night in that Cardinals football game, getting that Hail Mary. Like, it was ridiculous. It was a ridiculous catch by the Blazers. So, I'm just saying that I think the Blazers roster is much better and farther along than certainly the casual fan would expect, and even some of the quote-unquote experts, because for all the reasons that we just laid out, the guys they have, and most importantly, that Nurkic factor is immeasurable.
Gotcha. All right, man, we covered a lot of ground.
Whew. Let's do it again on Thursday. Is that we're doing this, or Wednesday?
Thursday, we're going to recap Wednesday's draft, and then Friday we'll dive heavy into free agency. Hey, nice chatting with you.
You too, buddy. Good luck covering your first draft. We'll see, and all you fans enjoy Wednesday. It's always a fun day for